Welcome to 30 with Tony. We are back again. The ABCs of why we are here is that we love you. So let's get it on.
Do-bop-si-doo, boom-ba-boom-boom-boom. Do-bop-si-doo, boom-ba-boom-boom-boom.
I'll always want you because my heart is true. Come closer, and I'll tell you of the ABCs. Darling, believe me, every time I love your song, find a place there in your heart, and I'll tell you of the ABCs. Gosh knows I love you, heaven knows it's true. I want to be near you, JKLMNOPQ. Run, honey, and don't be blind. Sugar, you stay on my mind. True love is hard to find. I'll tell you of the ABCs. You make me love you. Long always too true. W, X, Y, and Z. I've told you of the ABCs. Run, honey, and don't be blind. Sugar, you stay on my mind. True love is hard to find. I'll tell you of the ABCs. You make me love you. Vow always to be true. W, X, Y, and Z. I've told you of the ABCs. Told you of the ABCs.
Well, hi, Kemosabe's. It's Tony D'Angelo. It is March 21st, 2024, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Ada Domini in the year of our Lord, and welcome to another edition of 30 with Tony. I'm so happy you're watching. I'm so happy you're paying attention. I'm so happy you're sharing with your friends, because the idea of this program is to get you to think, get us all to think, get us all to read, get us all to ask really good questions that our media is not telling us, our government isn't telling us, our political parties aren't telling us, to make you a better informed and more protected and aware citizen, because it doesn't look like there's a lot of protection coming from government. I mean, the older I get, it seems that government's in one place and, you and I are in another. My function here is to give you information to make you harder for government to deal with, because they work for you. You don't work for them. They are not, the reason for their existence is you. They want you to think that you serve them. And this kind of goes across, all kinds of party lines and all kinds of, religious denominations, quote unquote, in whichever way we go. But we had actually, before I begin, I want to thank all of you guys, all of you watching near and far. I want to thank our music contributors. We had such incredible commentary last week for the music that we had on the last show. I'm endeavoring to beat it this show. I think the music is fun. I think the classic clips are fun. Kind of gives you a little break, in between the heavy stuff to, sort of, like Laura Ingraham has on Fox, the political palate cleanser. Well, that's kind of my palate cleanser, something a little bit different so that you can better focus your perspective. That said, we had such I don't want to call it a riot, but an incredible outpouring on last week's show about your house is not your home. And we rang some bells, and that's the idea. And yet, in thinking about, what I was going to do this afternoon, you kind of go between a couple of different subjects. Should I introduce something new? Should I follow up on what I've done? I have learned that these stories have continuing life to them, because just because we hit a topic and we move on, does not deal with, because the little gremlins, or the little ugly gremlins, or the little commie gremlins are still working against you, as you sleep, as you go to the grocery store, as you take your kids to school. They're not stopping. So my idea is I'm not going to stop either. Well, that said, we had such an incredible outpouring last week about people really getting wise to the fact of what was going on in Connecticut government with respect to your housing. Now, if you are a homeowner like I am, evil, racist, horrible, selfish, abusive wretch that you are, you've worked very hard to keep that home over your head. And, you've done the lawn, you've done the recently, we did a roof here, we did a platform, we did a new gate out in the front, because our home, where we are, where we live, where we work, is very important to us, as well it should be. We're not being a burden on society. As a matter of fact, we're like fighting government to do what we need to do. The most insulting comment I've ever heard from any president anywhere was Barry Obama, when he said to all of us business owners, "You didn't build that." And the thing is, oh, yes, we did, Barry, and we built it around people like you. And I still feel that we do that. Like I always say to people, Connecticut has a horrible racial problem. There are two races, everybody connected in some kind of way with government and everybody else. That's the racial problem in Connecticut. Anything else is just anything else they toss you is just today's term is false flag. I like to say red herring. But that said, I began to think about last week's show. And, I've talked about this for a few years. Actually, I was talking about this in 2019 as far as what would happen with neighborhoods. And, politicians heard it on the Lee Elsey show, and other people heard it, and they said, it's just not possible what he's saying. Is he kidding? Does he have no faith in the processes? Well, I wasn't kidding. And yeah, I have no faith in the processes, much less the politicians in many cases. And, here we are in this particular thing where a Connecticut homeowner, or a person wanting to live in a rental reasonably without having to be a social crusader, just live safely, do what you need to do. You're now an enemy of the state. You're now a target. And that was so far-fetched in 2019 and 2020. But now, last week's show, we saw what the desegregate Connecticut's and the Irises are planning. And what it is that it's the massive building of property to effectively affect supply and demand. Economics, which is well understood by the slobs and the greedy people who are building these things, not at all. Economics are not understood at all well by the majority of politicians in either party, much less the Democrats than the Republicans. But what happens is when you have an increase in supply and your demand stays the same or drops, the value of the goods go down. So the value of your home goes down. And there's just a lot of nonsense that people are throwing in this regard. And a lot of the nonsense comes from the political parties. And, a fair amount of the nonsense comes from Connecticut state Republicans. And what I said in 2019, what I said in 2021, 2022, and what I'm going to tell you in 2024 is that the people who think this is a good idea are often young, dumb, and deluded. And I've said I was around during the days of when public housing or public driven housing or municipally designed housing was considered to be a good idea. And, I've said that. Then finally, this morning it dawned on me that, maybe I need to show people what this is, because right now, as I'm seeing things happen, it's like you got a tire, and the tire is running with maybe one tread on the car, and any little bump can blow it. And it's really you and your politician to convince your politician, or more than likely to shame your politician and to expose your politician for his total and complete lack of knowledge on things, that he better see this for what it is, and he or she better put a stop to this, or you're going to make it very difficult for that politician. Again, do not strike this person. Do not harass them, outside of the realm of, just not gentle, but general complaining and exposure. And, the First Amendment is still with us. However, there is assault and battery. I want to make that very clear. I always intend to make that very clear. I know some of these characters, oftentimes I'll just shrug my shoulders and say, man, he needs a slap. That's how I feel, but I'm not going to go do it. But that all kind of being as it is, I'm going to give you D'Angelo's history of the slums. And I'm going to show you where these political nincompoops are leading you. Okay, so now that we got our business out of the way, allow me to elucidate. I'm going to go over to here and listen. I'm going to tell you the truth. I got to tell you the truth. And I'm going to go to, actually, I want to go here first. Article. Connecticut Mirror. This would be March 15, 2024. The young lady writing it, her name is Ginny Monk, and she talks about the fact that Connecticut bill to increase housing passes committee. Now, I had found out about this before it happened from my good buddy gals over at CT 169 Strong, who are fierce advocates against this. They know exactly what's going down, and they see what's happening. And they're not getting any support whatsoever with respect to really their heartfelt desire to maintain the integrity of their town. And here's we've looked at the cast of characters before. Eleni Kavros de Graw. Eleni wants to have a thing where the churches can have tiny homes, i.e. storage sheds in their backyards to house the illegals. I said on the Lee Elsey show, and the homeless, that this can actually, those of you that are fighting this, I encourage you wholeheartedly to contact the Internal Revenue Service and ask for a ruling, because charities cannot break the law, and zoning is a law. And it also gets away from the charitable purpose of a church. This is where you got to fight them, where, they're not, they want to guilt you into thinking what they're doing are right. But you need to actually, you've got to get at them harder than they do at you. Hiding behind Eleni is our boy Anwar. And here is the, shall we say, the poster boy for all things of diluting housing, Pete Harrison, now moving up in the annals of the Regional Plan Association, a NGO nonprofit funded by the Soros Open Society. And here's the First Lady of Brookfield. I don't know who this guy is with the white beard. I think I've kind of fought with him a couple of times on Twitter, but I got to admit that white beard does catch my attention. And so the article goes on, and talking about House Bill 5390, we talked about that last week. The bill is backed by advocacy group. Notice advocacy group. These are good people, according to Ms. Monk, to segregate Connecticut. And Democrats said at the end of last session they wanted to prioritize the concept this year. Hey, the lobbyists are getting very, very, very antsy. The natives are getting restless. The organization has advocated for some version of a transit-oriented development bill every year since 2020. And comments here from Mr. Graw. And we're talking about an amended version of the bill. And they tell you it's a little bit softer than the bill that they had, dealing with the brownfield remediation. And now the tack is a little bit different. We're dealing with friendlier provisions with respect to that. Actually, let me just go back to here if I can. The amended bill puts much of the power for overseeing and helping with the district's development in the hands of the Office of Policy and Management rather than the Office of Responsible Growth. Now, to a person like Ms. Monk, she looks at that and thinks that something is very positive. I look at that and say, well, great. We've just gone from Mussolini to Tojo. What's the difference? It's still a bureaucrat. It's still out of Hartford. It's still somebody state paid. It's still somebody who's going to do the bidding of the legislature, i.e. the Democrat legislature, and King Governor Ned Lamont, the unaccountable. So, it's like Coke or Pepsi, pick your poison. And we move down the article. We talk about the wonderful advocates who want to talk about a lack of dire housing in the state and help the environment by encouraging people to use public transportation. Okay, so as we said last week, as I said last week, I am this horrible person. I am rotten. I am racist. I am terrible. I own a home. I drive a gas-powered car. I own a business. And I don't use public transportation. Really, the area that I live in really doesn't have it, and it's not really convenient given the time constraints I'm under every single day. I don't have anything against public transit per se, but yet public transit should be in places where it is useful as opposed to putting it where people don't need it or want it. And the article goes on. Ms. Monk talks about the fact that it's one of the more controversial bills. No stuff, Sherlock. And this is a curious thing, and this is where I think Ms. Monk let down. Republicans said, and this would have been Friday, March 15th, they wanted to see more reforms to 830G that offers legal remedies to developers when towns deny applications to build affordable housing. Towns are exempt if at least 10% of their housing is set aside as affordable. And if a developer files a lawsuit under 830G, the burden of proof shifts to the town to prove they denied it for reasons of health and safety. Now, where I feel Ms. Monk let down is I wanted to know particularly, I had to look it up exactly, where the Republicans were complaining as to, are they complaining about the fact that don't remove 830G? Are they complaining about the fact that 830G isn't strong enough? Are they complaining about the fact that let's stay away from this? The local zoning boards and the people in that community can handle it. I really don't know. And I'm even more confused when I read the commentary of Senator Ryan Fazio, who calls the transit bill overly prescriptive. Not really sure what the meaning of that is, Ryan. Now, what I do want to highlight, however, is I think he's quite clear. I think we all agree on a couple of different things across party lines, across this committee and this body, making a egalitarian statement, which is that first, when we put local communities in the driver's seat with regard to governing their towns and cities, we get the best results. Yeah, again, no stuff, Sherlock. Fazio said, and second, that we also need to create housing and development policies in the state. Now, this sentence here kind of threw this kid in a tizzy. Just, if you watched last week's show, you know what I'm talking about. And if you didn't watch last week's show, go back and watch it. There is a lady who gives testimony. Her name is Ann O'Brien. This is Ann O'Brien. She is the director of sponsorship at IRIS, Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services. And she gives testimony to the Senate committee. I believe it was Senator Rahman, Eleni Kavros de Graw, and Ryan Fazio. And she pretty much comes right out, which Ryan Fazio was surprised and says, we're advocating the building of multi-unit housing to house illegal aliens, or if you prefer, migrant illegals. Call it yabba dabba do. It's what it is. Okay. I like to use migrant illegals. But they are, quote unquote, in the country illegally. And when you go back here to Senator Fazio, you would have, and he actually was upset that, this is new to me. And I mean, I thought maybe the light went on that, hey, Ryan, you getting the game here? You seeing what's happening? But apparently not. he's back on the train here. We're seeing what's happening with respect to, this is really what people were driving this thing for, Ryan. But here he says, we need to create housing and development policies in this state. All right. Little economics lesson. I have maintained since the beginning of time, and I'm not all that intelligent, I'm not all that good looking, and I'm not the smartest, the fastest, the quickest, or the most, shall we say, acute in perception. But I have maintained since the beginning of time, you cannot have housing without an economy. Because if you have housing without an economy, you are building slums. You are building places for people to go that really talk about, being heavenly minded with no earthly good. They're not earthly minded and they are no earthly good until they actually get out and do something. No person is illegal. Well, this is the cost of no person is illegal. So this happened yesterday. Actually, maybe it was 2 days ago. The area of Connecticut I live in, northeastern Connecticut, is a lovely area, but there's a lot of what's surrounding it, well, that I like to call, not because I like to say this, but unfortunately it's true, known as White Appalachia. Parts of the state environment, economically speaking, that's socially, economically, and integrationally have never moved past the 20th century. They're the descendants of the people that worked in the mills. And guess what? The mills ain't here anymore. So if they choose to be close to their family, we should do a show on that, because many times you've got to get out and go where it is if you can't find it close to you. And it's painful, but unfortunately, it's like taking off a Band-Aid. You have to do it so the scab can heal. But jobs have come in the form of whatever you want to call it, working jobs, basic training, manual skills that people could go and, have an apartment, maybe pull their money, have a small home, and buy their groceries and live with dignity. Now, we're taking this away in a region like the region I live in. We have a housing crisis in this state. Now, assuming those 300 jobs have an average salary of $50,000, not that everybody makes $50,000. Some make, managers make more than that, people make less than that, but let's just say, that's $15 million going out of my region. And that's money to the grocers and the dry cleaners and the car repair guy and the kids' entertainment and things like that. So it has a rippling effect throughout. Now, if we have a housing crisis in the state, all these people, to Ryan Fazio and others, were ostensibly housed somewhere the day before they got their layoff notice. They weren't talking about, I can't find a place to live. They're working, doing whatever. And now what we're doing is we're taking away their means of, shall we say, sustenance. Now, why is this happening? Why is this happening on a global level? Well, we have a POTUS who closed a fuel pipeline and caused fuel to become incredibly high priced. And if you're somebody like Walgreens, drugstore, every single plastic item you pick up in that store is having something to do with petroleum, is made with petroleum. It was brought there with a truck that uses petroleum. And the costs get driven up. Now, private business, which there's a lot of stupid things going on in private business, but not nearly as stupid as government, is going to say, well, what do we need? What do we need this? Can we do this over here? Are we better off shipping the stuff with FedEx? Are we better off moving something that way? And, when that happens, the demand for housing, for jobs, for schools and all that goes out the window. So frankly, I don't know what the hell Ryan Fazio is talking about personally. And if you're close to him, please ask him. Please ask him to reconcile this thing in my mind. I'm asking it now because it's just, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I mean, it's not rocket science that if you go back to IBM in the 1960s, I grew up as a, kind of in a poor part of Stamford, Connecticut, but if I wanted to get in the car, I could drive up, and I used to do this applying for jobs when I was getting out of college. I could get in my dad's Oldsmobile and drive all the way up High Ridge Road and take a left off of one of those state routes in New York, and I would end up in an IBM campus when IBM was the gold standard of the world. That's another story for another time. But basically, what was around IBM? Wonderful, beautiful suburban homes, big, nice cars, nice parks, nice neighborhoods. I mean, a place I really would like to live in. My aspiration was to live in a place like that. God forgive me and call me evil and racist for wanting to do that. But basically, the economics drove the housing. Connecticut, including the Republicans ostensibly, think that the housing is going to drive the economics. And meanwhile, you got job losses. It's like, listen, I'm not that intelligent, but isn't this pretty obvious to you? And it's just insane as to where this goes. But where I have been, I'm just going to stop the share here for a moment, and I'm going to get back to it. Where I feel I've been remiss is that when in explaining this, is when we start to build housing without an economic underpinning, we are in for terrible, terrible, terrible trouble. And I appreciated the testimony last week we looked at of Sydney Elkay in Desegregate, Connecticut. But I said to myself, here's a very nice young lady, very well spoken, working for a municipal, I don't know what it is. And I mean, basically, she's working for tax money or working because of tax money. And she wants to, not meaning to pick on the kid, but this is the mindset of so many. And she wants to use this tax money to give her appropriate housing so she can continue to work for tax money. And yet, in order to have tax money, my dear, you need taxpayers. You need economic engines. Connecticut's got none of that. Connecticut's got the state Department of Economic and Community Development. I like to call it the Department of Economic and Community Destruction. For all the bazillions we've given them, I mean, what are they doing? Ask yourself the question. Hey, they're a great piggy bank for King Governor Ned Lamont, the unaccountable, right? But where I've been remiss is that I've told you about the slums and what happens, but I haven't shown you. Today, I'm going to show you where this is all headed. And what I want for you to do is I want you to take this show and run this under your representative's nose and make them answer these questions. Shame them into answering these questions. I don't care if they're Democrat, Republican, German, Martian, Yankee, Red Sox, makes no difference. We're talking, quote unquote, the capital underpinnings of what you yourself have been willing to do in order to work so hard to do. And we're talking about you keeping it away from some of these, I'm going to use the term bird brains, because unfortunately it fits. Back to the share. Okay, here we go. What are we going to look forward to? And I want to share with you a little bit of the history of public housing. We don't have hours and hours and hours to get into it, but public housing was started years back by people, mostly church people, wanting to do well, wanting their people to have houses. I mean, the unreconciled discussion I never had with my father. I lost my father at an age, younger than I am right now, was that I often would say, why do we need Social Security? Why can't people invest for themselves? My father would say, well, they won't do it. They will end up in the poorhouses. And the poorhouses were a real place. And the poorhouses were, if you couldn't pay for your rent, you dragged your belongings out to the side of the road, and the wagon would come and take you to the poorhouse to live with the other poor people who couldn't pay the rent, and they largely lived in a big mess, sadly. And they lived due to, they lived because of charity. So Social Security gave them at least a basic income. Now, we can go back and forth about Social Security. That's probably another show of itself. The danger in getting rid of Social Security today is the investment, shall we say, the investment community. That's a compliment. People in the investment business would shark people who are, who get this wallop of money. It's like, well, where do you invest it? And they're heavily lobbied. They are heavily sales oriented in many, many cases. They are not concerned about their clients in many, many cases. Not all, but basically it's a sales model. You have to sell, you have to keep selling, you have to keep generating revenue. If it comes between a thing, I mean, I've been in the trust business close to 40 years. If it comes between a thing of, do you keep that security because that security is good to your client and you don't get anything because of it and you advise them accordingly? Or do you sell that security because you need commission money and your numbers are down? That's inherently the problem with it. And this is a blanket statement. It's not good, bad, indifferent, and otherwise, but this is how it gets abused. Social Security, as it is, doesn't get tampered with that. And I mean, it's probably a think tank subject for another point in time. But basically, I've made reference to the fact of places like Cabrini Green Homes in Chicago, Illinois, came out of the fact that we need to house people because if we don't house them, they're going to, if we don't give them affordable housing, they're going to end up in the poor farm. They're going to end up in the poorhouse. And basically, this is something that started in the urban renewal movement over here. It talks about that of the post-war era. And it started out, there's a timeline if you choose to read it. Wikipedia really has a very good article about how it happened. And it was a working person's place, if you will. And since it had a public influence, people in the community, quote unquote, cough, spit, looked at it and said, well, we've got to find places to house those who can't afford to do on their own. Now, can't afford to do on their own. There are people who can't afford to do on their own or can't do on their own. That's a little bit different from people who don't want to do on their own. Now, I've taken so much garbage from people about, jumping on the churches and jumping on the Lenny Calvers de Gras and talking about, you guys who were affected by this, going out and actually looking at a church's tax exemption for doing things like that, that how could I be a Christian and how could I do something like this and I'm this horrible phony? But the Second Thessalonians in my Bible says that if you don't work, you don't eat. Quarrel with the man that wrote the book. Don't quarrel with me. But basically, and of course, politicians want to rewrite the Bible and use the parts for their own benefit. But basically, Cabrini Green started as something good, and then it became a racial incident. Now, you notice in 1966, we had a case. Gaudreau versus Chicago Housing Authority. Chicago's public housing program was conceived and executed in a racially discriminatory manner that perpetuated racial segregation. So you started to do things because of the numbers. And when you did that, you opened it up more. There's hardworking people in this place. They're cast by the wayside. You get people coming in, destroying, graffiti, vandalism, robbery, drugs, crime, you name it. And, the best intentions of men go down the toilet. And you look at this and you say, well, if you get over to here, if you get over to Work, Live, Ride, and this particular bill here, the people doing this, I can tell you this much. The people that were involved in this endeavor were a lot better people and a lot more acute and a lot more intelligent than the people involved in this endeavor. One picture can draw 1,000 words. But anyway, when you get over to here, it's like, what happened? Well, it's when you remove the incentive for people to do well, and when you lower the bar gets worse. And if you go back here to our buddy lady, Ann O'Brien, what was she telling Ryan Fazio? I want to house illegals in these places. This is a matter of social justice. This isn't rocket science, people. Draw your own conclusions. Okay. It came closer to us in Connecticut. What happened to Cabrini Green? It became such a mess of drugs and crime and all kinds of horror. They had to rip the freaking place down. There was no saving it. You like peanut butter, you love Skippy. I'm a Stanford kid, Southfield Village, right? Started in 1954. Now, Southfield Village, when it started, I had friends here. I had friends in Cabrini Green, I had friends in Southfield Village. Southfield Village started as a modest working person's place to live. Many families lived there. They called it the projects. There were families, there's mothers, fathers. We were in school together. They did what families do, and they put together their money and they went out and they bought homes. And then life went on, and for them. Now it had 525 families, and basically what happened is, when the families left and the whole decline of the family structure and the whole advancement of the welfare system, it became a drug den. It became something. Now, of course, we're going to have no problems whatsoever with Work, Live, Ride. Again, look at the cast of characters. But we're going to have no problems whatsoever with Work, Live, Ride. But yet, we have defunded police, and we have a political system that protects no one, and everybody's going to get along just fine. So when Sydney L.K. comes home to her house, and God knows what is going on happening in the apartment next to her, and she's got a difficult presentation that she's got to make the next day. It may mean her job. And what is she going to do? Call the police? Well, maybe the police can't get there. Maybe she's got to check in on a website. Maybe she's put at physical risk. I mean, does anybody think about this? No, we need more housing. We need more housing, but we don't have any kind of economic environment to generate more housing. One generates the other, to Mr. Fazio and the esteemed members of our legislatures. But anyway, Southfield Village was finally torn down. Shooting of a 7-year-old girl in 1993 attending her friend's birthday party. And they said, okay, enough of this. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. This model does not work. And for every young person, I'm going to say something much more harsh. Every young person who said, Indiana, isn't that public housing? Well, what is it? If somebody owns the building and it's effectively run in the same failed model of the same failed slums of years gone by, what the hell is the difference, kid? You tell me. Okay. If you like peanut butter and if you like Skippy, I got Skippy with nuts for you. And Father Panic Village in Bridgeport, okay? Was a quote unquote faith-based housing development. The Catholic Church was involved. Same thing, St. John's Towers, the well-meaning Catholic people. We've got to house those who can't get housing, and ended up in this horror of drugs and crime, and it just, because when it came down to, okay, who's going to clean the mess up? The church looked at the government looked at the church, the people looked at each other and said, oh my God, no pun intended, we are in terrible trouble. And basically, it was affordable housing. And started in 1963. A fight at a baptismal party led to the death of Pablo Gonzalez. And the article is very accurate here, as it said, slowly degraded into a slum and became a centralized point for crime and drug dealing in the 1980s. Of course, put it this way. When you have something that people can't deal with and it's growing at such an exponential thing, and when you have people like you have today who want to defund police and don't want to have a high bar, guess what you're going to have? It's like it happened then when people were a whole lot better and they couldn't do it. A lot of them were involved in creating the mess, but once they created it, they couldn't stop it. And we're going to go over to here, and this group's going to save us all. Let's continue. And actually, I'm going to stop the share here for a moment. I want to make that very clear to you, and that how can I put it? You can't stop gravity. You can't rewrite history. You can't look at the rules of what society will do and say, somehow now it's going to be different because we have all the solutions. Now, that's on this level. The higher level are the people, the Rockefeller foundations, the open societies and all that. They don't care about any of this. They just want to get their thing done. And they'll do whatever they can, and they'll co-opt whatever they can, and they'll go to whatever state senator they can confuse or bribe to get the job done and to delude them. Now, I just want to see if we can do one more share here. Bear with me for just a second. I'm going to go over to here. And very good article. And that's the Walmart Distribution Center. This goes back to 1994, and it's in the Hartford Courant. And it talks about the decline of Father Panic Village and what people were what the living conditions were, 40, 50 years in this thing, and this is what's happening. And it talks about the violence, and it talks about it was this great dream, and it was built with New Deal money. Now it's Infrastructure Act money, right? It is now this is going back 30 years, the state's most notorious crime scene, drugs and blood. Ask yourself something. It talked about one lady in this article who had cats that she was housing, and a bunch of, pig-ass kids, set their pit bulls on the cats and killed them. And there was talk of rehabbing and I'm not going to take your time today to look at it, but I really think this is much must reading. And it's called Father Panic Village, Where Dreams Turn to Dust. And it's I guess what I'm really saying, or what I am saying, is stop the share. How is it going to be different now? Tell me. Tell the people who watch this show. Tell the people who listen to me on the Lee Elsey show, politician, builder, Ann O'Brien's, what's different here? What changes? As far as I'm concerned, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, with whatever issues he said he had, makes Joe Biden look like Mickey Mouse. John Dempsey makes King Governor Ned Lamont the Unaccountable look like Mickey Mouse. They were better people, and they screwed up. So how are you going to succeed? What are you trying to do? And in the case of Orion Fazio, you are buying into the thing that you have a need for housing, but yet we're in economic Armageddon. Without energy, does any Connecticut Republican come out and champion the Trump energy policy? Now, Donald Trump is a man of many things, but one thing Donald Trump has exactly right is you need cheap energy in order to do something. But no, we have to have e-cars, right? We've got to be environmentally sensitive. Now, I'm environmentally sensitive, but yet at the cost of everything else, and we're going to have a bunch of lunatics, 40, 50, 60 lunatics with some Republican enablers thrown in to say, this is what we need to do, where not one of these characters is standing up on a table yelling, this is idiotic, this is a mess, the housing is a mess, the energy policy, cough spit, is a mess, and you got to stop this thing. And guess what? So I'm going to do it. It's a mess. You need to stop this thing. And citizen, homeowner, person who wants as little to do with government as possible, you're the one that's going to have to get out there and put the pressure on, because these characters are not doing it. They're not defending you the way you need to be defended. And guess what? Many times you are your own best defense, because something's happening here, in our whatever globe of insular Connecticut whatsoever. And I don't understand it. Buffalo, Springfield, it ain't exactly clear. Something's happening here, and what it is ain't exactly clear. But I think it is clear. I mean, I think there's an incentive for people who pontificate this drivel, but they're just useful tools. It comes from something much greater. We really talk about the Republican way of life, not the Republican way of life, but the American way of life. And whether you be Republican or Democrat. And the question you need to ask these people, I can't make this any more clear, is to go to every single person. I don't care if they're the dog catcher. I don't care if they're an alternate on the Board of Education, and say, do you support the housing of illegal migrants in private homes? And would you ever be a part of something, if given the decision, where you would mandate this under the guise of a public health emergency? This is real stuff, people. And that's where it's headed. That's where the whole housing thing is headed, unless our Republican and Democrat legislators go and do something about it. Stop it now before any more damage is done. It's Tony D'Angelo here on 30 with Tony. We are rocking it out, Mama. We'll be right back right after this.
Something that moves my soul, and she knows I'd love to love her, but she lets me down every time. Can't make her mine. She's no one's lover tonight. With me she'll be so inviting. I want her all for myself. Oh, temptation eyes looking through my soul. Temptation eyes. Just the same, my head is spinning. She's got a way to keep me on her side. It's just a ride. It's never ending tonight. With me she'll be so exciting. I want her all for myself. Oh, temptation eyes looking through my soul. Temptation eyes, you've got to love me.
Hello fun seekers. Since we like to mix fun with business, please enjoy another video classic clip, courtesy of the producers of 30 with Tony.
Today's classic clip is from Little Caesar starring Edward G. Robinson. The year is 1931.
It's Tony. I can't figure him. The kid's a great driver. Oh, he must have lost his nerve.
I'll take care of him.
Now, let's see the color of that money.
Yeah, just a minute, Sam. I got my own ideas of a split this time. And you can take it my way or leave it. We ain't begging you.
Yeah? Well, I bossed this job. And I'm going to get my split in the regular way or else.
How'd you boss this job? By sitting here in your office shooting yourself a solitaire? Well, that don't go no more. Not with me, it don't. We're done. I've been taking orders from you too long.
Yeah, and you'll keep on taking orders, too. Or you'll get out of here so fast.
Yeah, well, maybe it won't be me that gets out.
No?
Yeah.
Well, maybe the boys have got something to say about that. What about it? So, that's it, huh?
Yeah. That's it, all right. Sam, you can dish it out, but you're getting so you can't take it no more. You're through. Well?
Well, the split's okay with me, Rico.
How about you, boys? No hard feelings, eh, Sam? We gotta stick together. There's a rope round my neck right now, and they only hang you once. If anybody turns yellow and squeals, my gun's gonna speak its piece.
Don't pour your love out on me, baby. If you do, then I think to maybe I'll just lay me down right for 100 years. Don't pour your love out on me, honey. Take my heart, my soul, my money, but don't leave me drowning in my tears. You say you're gonna leave, gonna take that big white bird, gonna fly right out of here without a single word. But you know you'll break my heart when I watch you close that door. 'Cause I know I won't see you anymore. Don't pour your love out on me, baby. If you do, then I think that maybe I'll just lay me down right for 100 years. Don't pour your love out on me, honey. Take my heart, my soul, my money, but don't leave me drowning in my tears. Haven't I been
Well, thanks, Kemosabe's. Thanks for staying with us in really a very difficult, but I believe a hard-hitting and necessary look at where we are really at in this state of Connecticut, as opposed to what people want us to believe with respect to where we are at. And, you know, this segment, I normally come out with some bit of a humorous story or a joke or an anecdote or something from my past or something from my present. And, you know, we like to end on that note. But today, for some reason, I really don't feel humorous. When I went through the last segment, I had a pit in my stomach, just saying, is this where we really are at in this society? Where people with no concept of anything whatsoever, in many cases, are making policies that they don't understand the ramifications of what they're doing. You know, they don't understand the fact that the world is greater than their little goldfish ball, and yet they want to completely rework things that really have taken a long time to do. And I mean, the racial thing is almost a laugh, because I mean, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was 60 years ago, and these lunatics want to fight the race wars all over again. And they just want to throw the term around, not even really understanding what it is. And I mean, where I look at the very young and the very tender, if they are thrown into these situations with really the evils of mankind right next door, it is not going to be a pretty sight. And society's going to have to pick up the wreckage. I'm telling you exactly where it is. Disagree with me if you want, but you're going to be the one picking up that mess and, paying the price for that. But, believe me, you guys are my Kemasabis. You are my friends. You are my viewers, and you are my you're my you're my compadres. Tell me what I need to do better. Tell me what I need to do to make this message more clear. I do my best to tell you, and if there's something I can do better, I want to know, because man, this is serious. These people, if you look at the assault of what's happening here, every single facet of American life is being assaulted. They did a wonder on COVID-19 when they had COVID-19 with the schools, so they got to the children. They're now trying to dilute the churches, making them political and making them, whatever you want to call it, bus stands for homeless, illegal housing. They want to assault the homeowner by devaluing his neighborhood, putting in transit-oriented development. They want to have incredible migration without any sort of, whatever you want to call it, control whatsoever. Bob Swick had a terrific article, this past Saturday about how Connecticut just uses our data, and there's no accountability on any level of the political spectrum from any representative whatsoever, some of whom are police officers, about, is this okay? I mean, here I am, I'm a trust officer, I'm a practitioner, I go nose to toes with the government daily, but, basically, I'm the guy bringing this fight. I'm going to bring it as best as I can. I'm going to use whatever I can to do it. But you guys are paid law enforcement. What the hell are you doing, frankly, about this? And I really don't understand it, but I just don't feel real humorous today. And I just need to see something, and I need to know something that would make us somehow, build the morale of this fight. Because many times the person who is most affected in this state is out there fighting for himself. But the other thing is, if you fight for yourself, you trust yourself, right? Like my old insurance guy years back would say is, I trust you, but I trust me more. Well, politician, even if I trusted you, in most cases I don't, I trust me more. And I trust the good people who are watching this particular show will go out and do things for themselves, because together we could make an incredible army. One thing I do want you to consider something for me. We, myself and several others, are thinking about building a network of whatever you want to call it, audio, video, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, bringing you content like you're seeing here, but on a higher level. I believe what we're doing here is very, very good. I'm not 100% pleased with it just yet, but to make it as good as we possibly can, because what the state wants to do, and George Colley had an excellent segment about this on the Lee Elsey show his last time out. The state wants to pay for media so they can get their message across. They say, oh, this is to support the businesses. Well, yeah, what it is buying the press so you'll never look bad. But when they start to do that, then the question is, who else is speaking up? Who else is going to do what they need to do for purposes of providing an alternative point of view, albeit the correct one? So I want you to think about that, and I want you to tell me and to message me or to email me at fortresstrust@aol.com, fortresstrust@aol.com. What would you pay per month for something like that? Because I'm not government. I don't do things stupidly and then raise taxes. I've got to create an economic model if something like this is ever going to be done at all. So you're telling me this, so you might say I don't have the money, or I won't pay for it because there's other stuff I can watch for free. I kind of doubt that, because people are paying for good content these days. People are paying for stupid content these days. So whatever it is, I just want to get a handle on it, and you tell me what you think it is, and that's something that I think we're going to need going into this decade, because government wants to take that right of free speech away from you and wants to take your ability to get good information away from you and away from you. It's really, coming to, I believe, the 2024 elections will tell a lot, but I think it's really coming to where we're in a situation where things like this, things like we're doing now, depending might be along the line of Radio Free Europe. Look at that in communist Russia in the 60s. And information will get out, but channels need to be established in order to do it if you're in hostile territory. So it's Tony D'Angelo here on 30 with Tony. Thank you, Keemosabis. Thank you for being here. We'll be back again next week with a better program, and as Dick Clark would say, an American Bandstand. So long.